Hello, good afternoon to all of you. I'm Walter Edwards, the director of the Humanities Center, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this talk. I have to apologize to Professor Batteau for scheduling it at this time, just a few days after the election, where people are kind of just in the wake of that momentous event and thinking of different things and trying to absorb it and so on. And they're less likely in that kind of mood to come to a Brumback talk. Um, this is an important topic, and perhaps in you know next year, if you can find a more propitious time for more people to to attend. But we will see if Dr. Batteau gives us permission to post it on our website. More people would still be able to come and hear it. But we're pleased that he has decided to talk with us on this very important topic, the technology and the common good in a democratic society. Um, Professor Batteau is an emeritus professor in the Department of Anthropology here at Wayne. From 2001 to 2010, he led the university's Institute for Information Technology and Culture, which is an interdisciplinary research unit dedicated to addressing the cultural challenges posed by advanced information technology. His research interests include disaster management, aviation safety, technological diffusion, corporate culture. Among his most recent articles are uh, a piece entitled Negations and Ambiguities in the Cultures of Organization, which are published in the American Anthropologist, and the Anthropology of Aviation and Flight Safety, which is published in Human Organization. Dr. Batteau is the principal investigator on a MAJOR disaster management project. That those initials stand for Multiple Agency and Jurisdiction Organization Response. He's also the principal investigator in an Escalate project, and that is an acronym for Engineering and Science Careers in Academia, learning from advance and translating effectively. That project, he's the principal investigator. In 2018, he launched the first Global Business Anthropology Summit, which will be held next year in Berlin. Prior to coming to Wayne State University, Dr. Batteau was director of research at Wisdom Systems Incorporated, which is a software firm. Before that, he was an executive director of the Institute of Illinois, a congressional research institute in Washington, D.C. Other appointments include assistant director and acting director of the Committee on Institutional Cooperation, the academic consortium of the Big Ten universities plus the University of Chicago, and an associate professor at Michigan State University. He is a recipient of numerous awards and honors, including fellowships from the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Congressional Fellowship of the American Anthropological Association, and the Order of St. Stanislaus from the National Aviation University in Ukraine. He received his PhD in anthropology from the University of Chicago in 1978. So you see you're in the presence of a very accomplished person who has had a very, very productive career here at Wayne and has stepped away from teaching and other responsibilities in the classroom, but is still researching and publishing as we go along. So as I've said earlier, his talk is entitled Technology and the Common Good in a democratic society. So please welcome to the podium, Professor Alain Batteau.
The virtual podium.
The virtual podium.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you, Walter. This is quite an honor to have the opportunity to talk with all of you. Could I have my first slide, please?
Yeah.
There. Okay. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. This is the outcome of some research I've been doing for several years and interested in the social effects of technology. Give a quick overview of my talk. There's 5 building blocks. First of all, at the top of the list is Elinor Ostrom's book, Governing the Commons, and I'll have more to say about that more in a few minutes, and how technology threatens governing the commons. The next building block is different types of goods, public and private goods, club goods, common pool of resources, and I'll elaborate on that. Third building block is Garrett Hardin's concept of the tragedy of the commons, how kind of, if we don't watch out, common pool of resources, the commons, can be degraded, and I'll talk more about that. Technological frontiers and the commons. In other words, as technology advances, what does this do for the commons? Just one illustration, I'll have more to say about this in a moment. But airspace. Airspace was not a commons. Okay. The first humans to go up in the sky with the Montgolfiers in the 18th century, but really airspace as a resource is very much a 20th century thing, and really began not just with the Wright brothers, but the whole growth of the aviation industry. So airspace, and I'll talk about newer commons as well, and I'll have some surprises for you there. Okay, and I conclude with what it takes to build institutions for a technological world. There are successful stories, but it requires management, it requires attention. May I have the next slide, please? There. Okay. Okay, the theoretical problem is collective action in a diverse society. In a small village, collective action is not a problem, but in a big, complex, big meaning both geographic and population-wise, in a big, diverse society, collective action is a problem. And we saw that with the last election. We are a very divided nation. And I really don't see any bright spots that this is going to change in the short term. Okay, further, technology adds complexity, it adds new centers of power. Okay, technology has created new empires. I mean, empires in the political sense are kind of a thing of the past. Empires really don't last very long. The sunset on the British Empire after a couple centuries, but newer efforts to create a political empire have found. But Google, Amazon, Facebook are all empires, and they're all empires based on kind of technology. So how do we define the commons? What does the commons have to do with the common good? Okay, that is our problem here. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, next few slides are going to be my theoretical foundations. Okay, at the top of the list, of course, is Elinor Ostrom's Governing the Commons, which she published in 1990. Elinor Ostrom is a political scientist, but she won the Nobel Prize in Economics for that. And kind of a little footnote here. This is from our friend Francis Trix, who recently retired from Indiana University. Eleanor Ostrom was a professor at Indiana University. And Francis tells me that the economics department at IU was really annoyed that a political scientist won the Nobel Prize for economics. Yeah. Okay, well, Eleanor, this is a very carefully reasoned book, and she identified 8 essential features for successful governance of the commons. I'm not going to read through the list, but you can look at the list. You can go to the book. I highly recommend it. Okay. The bottom line on this is each of these features is challenged in a technological world. Okay, just 2 examples. Okay, monitoring. Okay, in a small village, monitoring is very easy. But in a large empire with facial recognition technology, monitoring becomes, shall we say, an issue, because making the balance between privacy and monitoring is a challenge. Nested enterprises. Okay, how do these different enterprises fit together? This is a serious question. Okay, what are the different platforms that Amazon creates? Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, second set of theoretical foundations is to take a critical perspective on technology. Okay, here in today's society, we kind of have a gee whiz, ooh, that's cool, it's technology. Okay, but I kind of look at this in a more historical perspective, and my apologies to the archaeologists here, but the word technology only appeared in 1621. Okay, it really is, it was closely associated with the Industrial Revolution. Okay, and so, I mean, the ancients, the Romans and the like, had sophisticated tools, but techne was not joined to logos, the authority of the written word, until 1621. Okay. Part of my critical perspective is that we have new commons. I talked about airspace, that's obvious. Radio frequency spectrum, okay, that's kind of obvious because Marconi invented the wireless telegraph in the late 19th century. And now we all live in the ether. These cell phones are more instruments of sociability. And what does this mean? Well, that's a serious question. Okay. A third commons, which I'm going to talk about a little bit, is attention. Okay. There's a book by Tim Wu, The Attention Merchants. Okay, and basically, companies like Google and Amazon, they harvest attention. Google's biggest product is eyeballs. Your eyeballs, my eyeballs. What do they do with that? Well, they have our browsing history. Okay, they know what we're interested in. With Facebook, they know who our friends are, our likes. Okay, and our networks. And with that information, they have powerful advertising foundations. Okay, Google, Facebook, Amazon, and the like, their main customer is not you or me, it's the advertisers. Okay, there's a saying in business that if you're not paying for a service, you are the product. Okay, in other words, if you're not paying for it, then you're the product. Okay, and that's certainly the case with Google, Amazon, Facebook, and that. Okay, okay. Critical perspective on technology recognizes, yes, it has instrumental values, but it has some other values as well. Perfection of form, it's cool. Condensation of meaning. These little packages have incredible layers of meaning embedded within them. Okay, perfection of form, condensation of meaning. That's a good definition of poetry. Okay, one of my articles that I'm still working on is the poetic construction of technology. Okay, technology translates space, time, information. Okay, and technology is magic. There's an article by Alfred Gell on kind of the place of magic in modern society. For the most part, we don't believe in magic anymore, with two exceptions. One is advertising, and the other is technology. Okay. Bottom line on all this is the cosmology of a technological society. Technology Technology redefines our place in the universe. Have next slide, please. Okay, third part of my theoretical foundation is the nature of goods. Okay, see, what I'm trying to get away from is kind of this feel-good discourse of the common good, and kind of relying on Elinor Ostrom and others, recognizing different types of goods, and I'll have a slide on this in a moment. But different types of goods include club goods, which possess my membership, common pool resources like an open meadow, okay, public goods, a city street, okay, private goods for most of history have been the exception rather than the rule. Okay, it was only with Adam Smith and the Wealth of Nations and kind of the whole liberal turn that we began to celebrate private goods. Okay, private goods really have not been a dominant force in most of history. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, just to elaborate on all that a bit. Okay, this comes from Elinor Ostrom. Okay, and she makes a couple of distinctions for goods. First of all, subtractability. Okay, like public goods have low subtractability. Okay, knowledge is not subtractable. If I acquire knowledge, that does not decrease the availability of knowledge to anybody else. A sunset is not subtractable. Okay, so useful knowledge and sunsets are public goods. The other thing that distinguishes them is that it's difficult to exclude people from having access to them. That sunset is out there for all of us to see. Okay, so low subtractability and difficult exclusion distinguishes public goods. Contrast that to easy exclusion and high subtractability, which distinguishes private goods. Okay, and two of Ostrom's examples here are personal computers and donuts. I'm quoting directly from Elinor Ostrom, but let me add a little footnote here. Okay. Both of those private goods are highly dependent on public goods. Why? Donuts, we depend on the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, to assure us that they're safe to eat. FDA not closely, but definitely monitors the quality of food and ensures that it's safe. Okay, personal computers. My God, personal computers are dependent on standards, which are a public good. Standards in terms of how we define the architecture of these devices are a public good. And standards are one thing that define technology, and standards are a public good. Standards are associated with state level formations. Just one or two illustrations of this. I mean, standards, we don't think about them, okay? But standards include like electric current? Do we use direct or alternating current? Do we use 110 or 220? Well, it depends partly on what country we live in, okay, because standards are state formations. Metric and imperial measures, perfect testimony of that. So standards are very much a state formation, okay. Two other types of goods here, common pool resources, which are kind of the archetypal commons, irrigation systems, okay. That's an irrigation, a common pool resource is difficult to exclude people from, but it is high subtractability. If too many people draw water from the irrigation system, it's depleted. So irrigation systems are a common pool resource, as are libraries, okay. If you take a book out of the library, it's not there for me to use, okay. And the other type of goods, all of this fits into my argument. Toll goods or club goods, journal subscriptions, daycare centers, easy to exclude people, but low subtractability. Okay, could I have the next slide, please? Okay, I based this on a historical narrative, okay? Going back to the enclosure movement in the 17th and 18th century, where peasants, the enclosure movement peaked from 1760 to 1832 and completed the destruction of medieval peasant community. Before enclosure, much of the arable land of the central region of England was organized into an open field system. In other words, the fields are there where everybody in our community is free to farm it, okay? And it was a common pool resource. What disrupted the rise of the factory system, spinning, weaving, carding, metal workers took place in factories. Technological developments, steam engines, railways, telegraphs. I'll just mention, here's a little footnote here. We often think in terms of technological determination. I mean, Marx said that the steam engine gave us the factory. But the historical precedence was the other way around. There were sugar factories in the Caribbean a couple centuries before James Watt invented the steam engine. In other words, the rise of the factory system created a technological void that the steam engine filled. Okay, so technology pushes along this development, this whole historical arc. We have new enclosure movements, okay? Whether the privatization of public services, I mean, the efforts to turn public goods into private goods, okay? New platforms, okay? Amazon is a platform. Amazon, as you know, started out as a bookseller about 25 years ago. I mean, their timing was perfect because that was right at the beginning of the internet. But 25 years ago, Amazon was a bookseller, but now they're an everything seller. They're a platform for everything, including movies. They create movies, they distribute movies. They not just sell groceries, they deliver groceries. I mean, everything. Amazon is the everything store, okay? And finally, final part of this, my narrative, is new technologies, social media, and I'll have more to say about that more momentarily, artificial intelligence, okay, surveillance, okay, and the list goes on. Could I have the next slide, please? Okay, kind of a pivotal concept in this is Garrett Hardin's Tragedy of the Commons, which he wrote in 1958. And it was kind of the based on common pool resources, but it can be applied to any shared resource. Schools, neighborhoods, the environment, anything can be degraded if it's not attended to. Big issue that I talk about in my book is free riding. Free riding is enjoying the benefit of something without paying for it. Okay, and the union movement understands this very well, which is why they push for closed shops. Okay, this is kind of interesting because, as you know, many institutions in the industries, the closed shop meaning if you work there, you have to join the union or at least pay for the cost of bargaining. Okay, but the so-called right to work movement says that people should enjoy the benefit of the union contract without paying the cost. Okay. That's free riding. Okay, and people who try to avoid paying taxes. Okay, if you like safe streets, if you like public order, you should pay for it. Okay, Oliver Wendell Holmes said, "Taxes are the price we pay for civilization." Okay, and free riding is the avoiding of the cost of civilization. And Eleanor Ostrom observed that this can be avoided, but only this tragedy of the commons can be avoided, but only through careful attention to governing the commons. Governing the Commons was the title of her book. Kind of the next slide, please. Okay, so how do we avoid the tragedy of the commons? Well, first of all, we accept that the commons is our commons. Okay, in other words, we own this. We have a responsibility to it. Okay. Second, we recognize that public institutions are how we manage our commons. Okay, how we kind of keep this under control. Okay, and finally, and this is where I hope to have something original to say, that the threat of technology undermines governing the commons, whether social media, facial recognition technologies, but other technologies as well, transportation technologies, kind of press the boundaries of the commons. The next slide, please. Okay, this is kind of the pivot of my book. Okay, that technology defines and bounds any shared resource in the modern world. Let me repeat that because it's so. Technology defines and bounds any sort of shared resource in the modern world. Okay, public goods like safe streets. Well, safe streets are technological constructions. Streets depend on standards, streets depend on construction, okay. Club goods, and I'll have more to say about club goods in a moment, okay. But common pool resources, okay. Let me just give just one illustration of a common pool resource. Eleanor Ostrom identified irrigation systems as a common pool resource. Power grids are a common pool resource. We have several thousand electric utilities in North America, but in the United States, these are all have an interconnection, okay, because first of all, they have the standard of 110 volt AC, okay. But second, the power grid, they've worked out load sharing so that if there's a lot of usage in one sector, another sector can ramp up to meet it. So power grids are a perfect example of a common pool resource created by technology, but made problematic by technology as well. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Things are in the saddle and ride mankind." Okay, and that was in 1847. 100 years later, sociologist wrote that an article about adjusting man to machines, which suggests that that things had won, that technology was now dominant. And that's a serious point here. Now, the next slide, please. Have the next slide, please. Can you hear me? There. Okay. Okay. Here's probably some of my most original observations, that frontiers of the commons. In other words, how are we pushing back against the commons? Okay. Well, I've mentioned airspace, obvious example. I mentioned radio frequency spectrum, obvious example. Branding. Branding is also a frontier of the commons. Brands are club goods. Brands create identity, okay? And brands are very much a technological construction, very closely related to mechanical reproduction. I'm building this on Walter Benjamin's The Work of Art in an Age of Mechanical Reproduction, that we create images, brands, that people define their identity around. And for me, the perfect illustration, okay, is the hog. Okay, I'm being a little bit facetious here, but that is a Harley Davidson. Okay, as you probably recognize, the Harley Davidson motorcycle. It's iconic American. In fact, Donald Trump mentioned this. It's made in Racine, Wisconsin. Can you see my slides? Are my slides up on the screen?
No, no longer.
Kennedy, are you there? These next two slides are very important, but we seem to have lost it.
Perhaps you can share them on your screen.
I will try. I don't.
There's a green square on the bottom.
Yeah, I got it. Okay, here we go.
Kennedy has returned.
Sorry about that. I don't know why.
You got kicked out.
You can't kick out this host. There we go.
All right.
Okay. That is a hog, Harley Davidson motorcycle group. And it's very masculine, very sturdy. They have a rally in Sturgis, South Dakota, as you probably know. They even have a corporate sponsored club, and I'm not making this up, the Harley Owners Group, get it. And it's iconic of identity. It's an iconic of identity, and it's a perfect example of what David has called a technototem. Okay, in anthropology, we look at tribal societies as having natural species as totemic. Well, here in a modern society, we have technologies as totemic, whether transportation devices, computers, social media. We define our identities through technological icons. Okay, so branding kind of is, I would say, one of the leading frontiers of the commons. In fact, it is the biggest factor in today's economy. Okay, why do I say that? Well, very simply, that for most companies, the brand equity, the market value, far outweighs the book value. In other words, their physical, tangible aspects, what they can book, is one thing, but the brand, the value of the company in terms of the stock price is much bigger, and that's called brand equity, and that is the biggest factor in today's economy. Can I have the next slide, please? Good. Okay. We live in cyberspace. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. Okay. But okay, The Square in the Tower, that's a title of a book by Nigel Ferguson, that the two coordinates of civilization, hierarchy, and networks. Okay. Attention and desire have become a commons, or more accurately, a common pool resource to be exploited by companies like Google and Facebook and Amazon. Okay. Consequence of this, as Arjun Appadurai observed, is that, oops, we lost it. Kennedy, are you there?
She's, I don't see her.
Zoom is
Yes.
technology in general.
Yeah, technology is great when it works.
We're at slide 14 now.
Actually,
Absolutely.
yes, slide
Is this
14.
the slide you need to be on, Professor?
Let's go to the next slide.
Yeah, Zoom is freezing up. Okay. Is everyone able to?
Yes.
Okay, I think we're good. Whoops.
It's gone again.
We lost it.
Almost feels like sabotage.
Could be.
Slide before that.
Keeps on popping out of Zoom.
Can you go to the slide before that?
Is this the slide?
No, that's, yeah, there you go. Okay. Scapes, oops.
What slide number?
Let me have 14.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, freeze. Okay.
All right, we are on slide 14. So.
Yeah. Scapes, I'm building this on Appadurai book, Modernity at Large. Okay, scapes are shared perspectives. Scapes are how we define who we are. Okay. Landscapes are a perfect illustration. Okay, because really part of the definition, for example, of an American is that we share a landscape. And this goes way back to the Hudson River School. okay, and goes back to the Wild West, okay, the frontier. Frontier is the frontier, however you define frontier, is a commons in American society, even in the 21st century, okay. The other, I'm going to keep talking to fight, but and hopefully we can get back to slide 14. So landscapes are a commons. Ethnoscapes are a commons. How we define the different ethnic groups we interact in. And here's just one illustration of that. Okay, that there's an imagined ethnoscape of immigrants coming from south of the border. Okay, and you heard a few years ago about these caravans of rapists crossing from the Mexican border. Well, immigrant hordes are more a feature of social media than they are of the southwestern border. I have this, I mean, basically, people who live in the Southwest, they'll tell you this is imaginary. This is an imaginary ethnoscape because they are not worried. It's only people in Washington that are making this up and projecting it on social media that have these immigrant hordes. Okay. One other scape, finance scapes. Okay. And this the term FinScape, financial technology, that is very much a 21st century thing. Okay. Really, as finance became more technologized, okay, as finance became more technologized, especially in the current century, that made it more dangerous. That translated it from investment into speculation. And we had a crash 12 years ago that illustrated that. And unless we tame fintech, unless we tame financial technology, we're going to have another crash. Okay. Let's go on to 15. The next slide. There we go. Very good. Okay. We do have many good examples of building institutions for a technological world. The top of my list is the International Law of the Seas. Okay. Before the 19th century, the high seas were no man's land. But now, and anything beyond the 3-mile limit was a kind of high seas. But the maritime nations were able to agree upon and here's some boundaries of the International Law of the Seas. And these nations all agreed upon it. Okay. How'd that happen? Well, don't have time to talk about it, but it's a good story. Regional development. This is one of my favorite examples. The Tennessee Valley Authority reclaimed the Tennessee Valley. Okay, and the TVA is now a perfect example of reclaiming a commons, and along with the Bonneville Power Authority. Estonia, the Baltic nation, okay, is very technologically advanced. I think I would suggest partly because they're resource poor, so they needed to kind of focus on technology. Estonia is an example of a nation that has used technology to bring itself together. Eurocontrol, this is the air traffic control of Europe and extending out beyond Europe. Okay. Again, the different nations agreed that this is how we're going to govern the airspace. And partly they were able to agree upon it because airspace is a club good. Airspace is a club good. In other words, the club, airmen, have agreed we need to work together on this. Okay. Bretton Woods, in 1944, the Allied nations met at Bretton Woods and they agreed upon, this is going to be the rules for international finance, and that lasted for several decades. Okay. In a technological society, problem of understanding what's the commons and how we govern it is an ongoing challenge. Okay, let me have the next slide, please. Can I have the next slide? Okay. The whole concept of reclamation, I think, is necessary to understand how we govern the commons. Okay. We have technological empires, we have pioneers and creoles who populate this. We have an educational commons. Okay. Educational institutions are kind of the major commons, and this goes back to the common school movement in the early 19th century, the land grant universities in the late 19th century. And I would suggest we can create the university commons, tuition-free public schools, as the engines of shared prosperity. In other words, the university has a leading role in reclaiming the commons. And here's a quote from David Lilienthal. David Lilienthal was the founder and chairman of the Tennessee Valley Authority. And this quote, I'm not going to read it because we don't have time, but he wrote this book, Democracy on the March. Okay, and essentially, we can do this if we have faith. Okay, so possibility is a new vision of the university which can reclaim the commons. Okay, let me have the final slide, please. Let me have the final slide, please. Okay, this is the table of contents from my book, which I just sent off to my editor yesterday. And I'm not going to read through it, but basically you can get a good sense of where I'm going with this, that from worlds without technology, in other words, the historical and narrative, to reclaiming the commons, what is the contemporary challenge? Okay, my time is up, and I will ask Kennedy to moderate a discussion, or how do we do this?
I can do that. Typically, we would ask people to raise their hands and indicate whether they want to have a question, or they can just jump in. I mean, we're a small enough group that if somebody wants to ask a question, they could just start out and ask a question. As it is now, I'm looking at the gallery. I don't see anybody with a raised hand. But clearly, if there's a question, and I don't see any questions in chat.
I'll make a comment.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought that was wonderful. And I almost feel like you could juxtapose the word technology for the word information and see what comes out. I'm coming from SIS, the School of Information Sciences. You brought up the example of Estonia. I lived in Germany for 5 years, and I would like to bring up the idea of Germany. I think in this country, America, people still have this feeling about Germany like it's a country full of Nazis. And I would like to say that Germany, I think through public education and the teaching of history, has struggled and has faced their shame, and that they are now a model for democracy.
Mm-hmm.
They have in their history, I spend my summers in Italy, and I can tell you, coming from the Italian perspective, many people still remember Mussolini. And when you have a shared collective history that's still present in your literature, it does affect you. We learn from the past, we learn from our mistakes, we learn from others' experiences. But I think in the United States, we never had this problem so far, where we've been dealing with fascism in the powers that be.
I will disagree with that very slightly, in that we had this history, this 250-year history of slavery. And then another century and a half after that, of second-class citizenship for African Americans. And we're still coming to terms with that. And part of the problem of coming to terms with it is that there's a lot of denial that there is there's even a problem. Okay. I'll just mention a little book by, I think her name is Farshad Manjoo, and the subtitle of the book is The New Jim Code. The New Jim Code. In other words, how racist assumptions are embedded into contemporary technology.
I agree wholeheartedly. I agree wholeheartedly. There's proof, well, garbage in, garbage out. A lot of these algorithms are racist. A lot of the facial recognition has been proven to be racist.
Perfect.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. And I also agree that it is the nation's founding was racist. But that my point was that history has not been taught in the public sphere. And so, like, what is that 1914 project, and people are starting to bring some of these, my example is I have a high school son, and when we moved back from Germany, he, in the high school, because I'm big at a public high school, I believe in public education, we sent him to the local public school, but they said that it was required for him to take American history. And I threw a fit and I said, he's not taking American history. He will study American history within the context of world history when he's a senior. Because I didn't have faith, when you talked about faith again, I didn't have faith that what they were teaching was a true representation of the history of America. And I still believe that. And he's in an international baccalaureate program now, which, if you don't know what it is, it's a pedagogy built out of the United Nations.
Yeah. Point well taken.
There's a question in chat about when may we expect the book to be published?
Oh, as I said, I sent my manuscript off to the editor yesterday, and the peer review takes a couple of months. And assuming I get a contract, say by early next calendar year, then it'll be several months in production. But I would make a commitment to keep you, however, I think maybe Kennedy can help me connect with people, keep you up to date on the production process. But I'll be happy to send anybody a manuscript if they want. Okay, the whole thing is about 75,000 words long. The manuscript is 160 pages. Okay, if you want your email inbox flooded, but I'm happy to share it.
Well, that's good. That's good to hear, because one of the projects the Humanities Center is considering is launching a book launch project where we kind of have people who are publishing their books have a platform to talk about their books and to invite people from around the world to look at what they're doing. We're planning to, we are considering doing it as a virtual project, because then we can get people from across the world to be in on this book launching idea.
Very interesting.
So that by the time we get around to that, if it's something that we decide to go forward with, by that time, your book will be published, and it would be a good opportunity to
Great.
to have it on thing. But are there any other questions?
Bruce was waving his hand, but his microphone is muted.
Yeah, I unmuted myself. So my question is about, I think there are actually different reasons to manage the commons. When I teach Hardin's essay, I think he actually suggests, or maybe only I do, that there's a prisoner's dilemma type situation where I think, well, either everybody throws all their sheep out onto the commons to graze or they don't. If they do, I might as well put mine out there too and get what grass they can. And it's not going to have any worse effects. And if they don't, I might as well put them out anyway and I'll be better off. And so no matter what others do, I should put all my sheep I can out onto the commons. And everybody thinks that way. And as a result, the commons gets destroyed and there's no grass for anybody's sheep. And so you need somebody to manage that so that that overgrazing doesn't result. And it occurs all nowadays, of course, where factory owners can think, now those people are going to use that coal-based energy and pollute the environment. Either they are or they're not. And if they are, I might as well do it too, because otherwise I'm going to spend a lot more money on scrubbers and clean energy. And so I should, if they're going to, use unclean energy, so should I. And if they don't, I should too, because it's not going to really make a difference. And I'll be a lot better off, financially by using cheap energy, which pollutes. And so no matter what others do, I will pollute. And then everybody does that and we have a heck of a bad environment. And so we need somebody to manage the commons in the air, So that's one reason. I think you suggest another reason about education. We ought to, manage the commons so everybody has equal opportunity by having public education, which is good and cheap. It promotes some good. So there's a different reason, sort of a common good for managing the commons. And then I think you get into these conflicts because you think, maybe we need face recognition because it's really a dangerous situation in the country and we have to identify the dangerous people. And then of course, that's a good end. But on the other hand, it gets abused and people are using this information in immoral ways. And so it's got a downside as well as an upside. So I don't know, I think basically the two things are to manage the common is to produce common goods like public education, which gives everyone equal opportunity. And the other is prisoner's dilemma situations.
Yeah.
Those are basically the two, I think, but you might say something different, Alan. You've thought about this a lot more than I have, that maybe there are other reasons to manage the commons that don't fall into those two categories.
Yeah, prisoner's dilemma is a good analogy. Okay, and again, basically this is kind of what Elinor Ostrom was pivoting on, that managing the commons or governing the commons, in her words, is a dilemma, okay, a prisoner's dilemma. And in a large, complex society, it's more difficult. And what I'm adding to this is that technology adds other dimensions of complexity. And how we resolve this, I don't know. Although I love your analogy about public education, I would take that a step or two further, that we should have free college education. State universities should be free, tuition free. Okay. And in fact, well, there's several, I talk about this in the book, there's several models for tuition free higher education. The City University of New York was tuition free for many years. The University of California was tuition free for many years. There's a little college in Eastern Kentucky, Alice Lloyd College, which was tuition free, but students had to do work on campus. In Berea College was also, so there's plenty of models for tuition-free higher education. We just need the political will to bring this about.
What do you think, Alan? Do you say rightly that technology as complexity, but do
Yes.
the two reasons still fall in those two categories, namely, either they're complex prisoner's dilemmas or the commons should be governed or managed because of some common good, which can only be produced by having the commons look such and such a way. So that despite the introduction of greater complexity, the underlying simplicity I'm proposing, I don't know if this is right, remains that it's either to manage prisoner's dilemma or to produce common goods.
I'm
That's
not
the bottom
completely
line.
sure.
Then I'm
Not
suggesting
completely-
there are only two reasons that boil down to one or the other for managing or governing the commons. That's what my thesis is. I don't know if it's right. I'm just asking you. So what do you think about that? Despite added complexity, it boils down to these two things.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm not sure I know either, but basically, what I would say is that technology adds complexity, and we haven't yet wrapped our minds around what that means.
I have one more comment, Alan. I have all my degrees from the University of California, and that was way, way a long time ago. And it wasn't free. Get this. The cost for 15 credits a semester was $243. Take that.
Yeah, well,
Currently in
let's see if we can get
Germany,
that.
pardon me, currently to enroll, for example, in university in Germany right now, you just register and you pay 200 or 300 euros. That's basically free education in my mind.
Yeah.
I agree. I was joking. I agree. Should be that way too.
Well, maybe that's our next big challenge.
Bruce, you're giving away your age. That was a long.
What's that?
In the dark ages. I didn't think you were
dark ages.
I didn't think you were so old.
I'm very old.
That's a long time ago.
Oh yeah.
That predates.
But it was good. Now we have. Hey, look, Bernie Sanders is my contemporary in this kind of education.
All right. I mean, if there are no questions, more questions. Kennedy has a little speech to give. Kennedy, are you there?
Dr. Kent, this is Tiffin.
Okay, all right.
Hello, everybody. I'm the administrative assistant in case something happens. Kennedy has lost connection with Zoom, so I'm just going to fill in very quickly.
Wonderful.
Dr. Allen, thank you for coming and giving your talk. We apologize for the technical difficulties, but you managed to see it all the way through. So we appreciate you coming and giving your talk.
Thank you.
Also, thank you everybody for attending. And we do have a special gift for you, Dr. Allen. I can't show it to you because I don't have it, but it is a mask and a journal. And Kennedy will reach out to you and figure out how she can get that to you as a special
Okay,
gift.
I'll look forward to it.
Yes,
and again,
absolutely.
thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, everybody have a wonderful day. Be safe.
Thank you.
And
This was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you're welcome.
So I think we're out.